This is a review of The 10th Insight by James Redfield, Chapter 3, Overcoming the Fear, Part 1 of 3, Joel Lipscomb. In this chapter, the main character encounters a man named Joel Lipscomb, who represents the vision of fear. I appreciate this section because it's a complete opposite of the happy new age, feel-good, spiritual approach to a more harsh and realistic, cynical perspective, and provides balance, provides a different ideology, and lets me know that Redfield is objective and that Redfield does see more than just his vision of the world. It's Redfield acknowledging, hey, I understand optimism and utopia isn't for everyone, and people that used to believe that no longer do. I'm gauging that Lipscomb represents the baby boomers and conservatives of 96. He was about 50 years old, it said. Reading this 20 years later, his words seem prophetic almost. He presents a needed contrast to New Age, a taste of realism. Sadness and anger are described in his personality. He speaks with directness and expects others to be direct. He can't understand vagueness. Thought of Charlene as a searcher. And I've been called this too, so is being called a searcher a bad thing? He doesn't believe in utopia, although he once did, but he thinks the notion is naive. Preaching the fear. He says that everything is getting worse. There's no utopia on its way. The economy is out of control and eventually will implode. There's a declining middle class in Western civilization. Middle class promoted order and reason and carried a general faith that the economic system could work for everyone. But this faith is collapsing now. Less people believe in the system or play by the rules. He believes this is due in part to a shrinking middle class. Automation is making human labor worthless and splitting people into the haves and the have-nots. And he differentiates these two by those who own and have investments in the global economy and those who work the menial service jobs. Education is lousy. Is it by design? It takes more and more effort just to survive, let alone thrive. And this is what I call the inflation on productivity, as well as monetary inflation diminishing purchasing power. And this punishes those who save responsibly. Preaching the fear continued. People are stressed out, have high tension, nobody feels secure, and we haven't even seen the worst of it yet. Population explosion, the idiocracy, the digital divide of technology, the educated and the uneducated. The haves will control more of the economy. Drug use and crime will continue to rise for the have-nots. Religious fundamentalists are taking over the Middle East and underdeveloped nations and destroy civilization, desiring to implement a religious theocracy dictatorship. China abortions on females, order and respect for human life are on their way out. So far, is he wrong? Is he lamenting the one world order? Fear, fear, fear prophecy. The world is degenerating. Mob mentality, ruled by envy and revenge, led by shrewd charlatans. But it's probably too late to stop it. And nobody cares. It reminds me of one of Al Pacino's monologues in Devil's Advocate. Politicians only care about maintaining their little power, their fiefdoms. The world is rapidly changing too fast. No one can keep up, and thus you can only look out for yourself. This thinking exists in nearly all groups, all professions. Everyone's raping the system, and no one is even pointing any fingers to total up their billable hours. By the way, I put a link in the description to the Devil's Advocate scene that I'm talking about. Eddie Barzoo, Eddie Barzoo. Ha! Lipscomb on journalism. In the past, journalists at least tried to be objective and do their job with certain standards of integrity. This no longer occurs. Now it's all about hype and sensationalism. Now keep in mind, this is right when the World Wide Web was just released in its infancy. And the reason I say that is people think it's the internet that degraded journalism, but no. The proof is here that this has been happening before the World Wide Web. No one is looking for the truth anymore, or trying to present it in the most accurate way. Now it's all about the scoop, or the most outrageous perspective, the most dirt you can dig up. Things are now reported before fact-checking. Ratings and circulation are more important than delivering accurate information. In the world of the dumbed-down, numbed, and distracted, the only thing that sells is the unbelievable. Young journalists believe they have to play this game to survive, and this leads to faking of stories, and since everyone is faking it now, no one calls anyone out. Everyone just makes fancy PowerPoints with graphs and figures, kind of like this video. And just a quick tidbit on my personal experience with journalism and press releases. They were not interested in objectivity. They were interested in polarizing and one-sided subjects for controversy. Part of it is bottom line mentality for money and ratings, which I understand that motive, But the motive that disturbs me is the psychological operations and social conditioning aspect, or the special interest propagandizing pandering, because the aims of those are unknown and the originator unknown. They throw variables into our ant farm and watch us scramble. Sometimes they're indirect angles that lead you to the outcome they want you to have. What's astonishing is this was published 20 years ago, right at the beginning of the World Wide Web, and it's even more relevant today. Don't let people blame the deception on the internet. It started before the net. Now, I have a bachelor degree in mass communications, mass media, and we were trained on how to use explosive language to manipulate demographics, how to play on people's egos, fears, and desires. They, the media, gatekeepers, powers that be, propagandize your mind in so many ways that if you attempted to explain it to someone, you would sound crazy. And the reality is actually worse than anything I've explained on this channel. As it stands today, I've already ran over my 5-minute limit, so I'm going to skip right to point 3. You define your target audience and then pander to them to gain their trust, and then slowly shift their truth and their message to your message and distorted version of truth. Over time, they won't even realize their truth has been replaced with your truth. And I learned that from Edward Bernays. The 10th Insight by James Redfield, Chapter 3, Overcoming the Fear, Part 2 of 3, End Times Prophecy. This is a continuation of the Joel Lipscomb conversation that he had with the main character. Lipscomb on law and justice. Lawyers, where's the pursuit of justice and truth? Celebrity trials subvert truth, convince jurors to believe the hypothetical where there is no evidence, and they know they're selling lies just to get their crook off the hook. Other lawyers go along with it and say it's de facto normal proceedings as if it's all justified. Their goal is to get their client off at all costs. Court TV and the media help them command higher fees by making a name for themselves that they're good at getting you out of trouble. The attorneys that help their client get away with murder are celebrated like they did something good. They're blatant because they think no one cares, and no one does. No one has the intestinal fortitude to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong. No one says anything, because everyone else is also ripping the system off. It's on TV for all to see, and no one puts a stop to it. Lipscomb on societal degradation. Cutting corners, maximizing short-term profits instead of planning long-term, all trying to make the quick buck and get out. And we'll break the spirit of trust we have with our fellow man to advance our own interests at the expense of someone else. Sooner or later, the fabric that holds society together and civilization is going to break. When the fabric breaks, what will happen when unemployment gets to a certain level in inner cities? If you think crime is bad now, imagine what it will be like then. What incentive will police officers have to continue keeping the peace and risking their lives for a public that doesn't notice anyway? Imagine taking the stand twice a week versus criminals you know did wrong and having to face an attorney who isn't interested in the truth, but how to distort it for a technicality or other way to put that crook back on the street. Why would you want to be on the ground in a dark alley somewhere with your blood dripping out, your life fading away, when no one cares about truth and justice and hate the police for keeping the peace? You then become disillusioned and just want to do your 20 years avoiding conflict, be as quiet as possible, take some silent bribes on the side like everyone else, and since everyone else is doing it, they won't rat you out unless you don't go along with the degrading program. Who is going to stop this? Lipscomb on spirituality and the 9 insights. He used to buy into it all, then decided it was crazy. The human mind can imagine all sorts of silly things. You could be influenced to think something mystical is happening when really nothing is happening at all. Ultimately, it's all wordplay, weird rhetoric, tricky semantics, linguistics philosophizing, rationalizing, etc. For instance, the valley they're in. That's not some enchanted forest. It's just a bunch of trees. Do you think all of the spirituality in the world is going to stop the people from destroying it? Wouldn't it be nice if something mystical was actually happening? It would be great, especially since the world is going down fast. But the reality is, nothing esoteric is occurring. We are just animals, just clever enough to figure out we're alive, and eventually we're all going to die without knowing our purpose. We are just pretending this is more than it is. And ultimately, we can't know what happens in the afterlife. Popular ecological dangers of 1996. Ocean pollution, man-made carcinogens, paper consumption, and other wood product consumption. Earth is turning into a garbage bin. No one cares about trees. Government gets to pave roads and buildings with taxpayer money and then sells off the resources at below market prices. They destroy the best, most beautiful areas for ruined land somewhere else just to appease developers. Lipscomb on God. If he exists, he is a cruel monster. What kind of God would design a place with children dying, crimes, people dying of starvation while restaurants toss out literally tons of food each day? But maybe it's supposed to be like this. A test of faith. Lipscomb on end times prophecy believers. They look for prophecy, most notably in the book of Revelation. They believe we are living in the last days, a time when all prophecy is revealed. History is set up for the return of the Christ, creation of the heavenly kingdom on earth. But before this can occur, earth has to suffer a series of wars, natural disasters, and other apocalyptic events, all supposedly predicted in the scriptures. Since they know the predictions, they spend their time watching the news for the events and keeping tabs on the timetable. The next event is a peace treaty in the Middle East that will allow the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Once that happens, a massive rapture will begin among the true believers, and they will be snatched off the face of the earth and lifted into heaven. The main character is like, really? They're going to disappear? Because he had just disappeared? He had just been in another dimension? Then comes the tribulation. Lipscomb on tribulation. 7-year period when all hell breaks loose for whoever's left on earth. Everything falls apart. Giant earthquakes destroy the economy. Ocean levels destroy many cities. Rioting and crime. A politician emerges, most likely in Europe, who offers a plan to fix everything. A centralized digital economy, coordinated commerce, and in order to participate, you have to get a microchip implant. Lipscomb reports on the Antichrist. At first, he protects Israel, facilitates a peace treaty, then attacks later, starts a world war, and it involves Islamic nations, Russia, and China. At the darkest hour, angels save the day. Just as Israel is about to fall, the angels of God swoop down and win the war. They install a spiritual utopia that lasts 1,000 years. Lipscomb's final analysis. He doesn't buy into the analysis of the end times prophecy. He says it's not even required. Mankind's greed and corruption will take care of it on his own. It doesn't take a Bible prophecy for a dictator to rise to power and manipulate people for power and take advantage of chaos. Beware of the collapse of the middle class. If societal conditions deteriorate, the panic spreads and people will look for any leader who comes along who says he will straighten everything out so long as the people surrender some of their civil liberties. The 10th Insight, Chapter 3, Overcoming the Fear, Part 3 of 3, Maya Ponder. Now this is one of the sections that I remembered from 20 years ago, and I'm glad to be covering it here. And what I remember most from it was that injuries and sickness are often caused from our subconscious. It's almost our fault, as if we're avoiding something or running from responsibility. So injuries. The main character wants to retreat or inform the authorities and abandon the quest. He tries to rationalize it as the best option. He winds up injuring himself by slipping and falling down a hill. As he was falling and rocks were falling towards him, a wispy white form moved in front of his body and he knew the rocks would miss. They crashed on the sides of him. What was this white form? How did he not get crushed by the rocks? His ankle began to swell and he wondered why this was happening. He's like in the middle of the valley by himself. Why the setback? Why did this happen? A woman doctor, Maya Ponder, just happened to be jogging by and stops to help. It's a coincidence or a synchronistic event. What luck this guy has. So she describes to him a new medical philosophy. Instead of diagnosing the patient, the doctor asks the patient what they think the diagnosis and severity is. She asks him to analyze his attitude. And she says that his recuperation time sometimes depends on what you think. Why did the accident happen? Why now? What are you trying to avoid? Your attitude towards these answers will affect your recovery. Instead of thinking about the body as a machine with parts that wear out and have to be fixed or replaced, we're beginning to understand that the health of the body is determined to a great deal by our mental processes. What we think of life, and especially of ourselves, at both the conscious and unconscious levels. In the old paradigm, the doctor was the expert and healer, and the patient was a passive recipient, hoping the doctor had all of the answers. We now know the inner attitude of the patient is crucial. Abandon the macho. Key factor into recovery is understanding fear, stress, and how it's handled. Conscious fear is obvious, but unconscious, repressed fear, however, is more difficult to identify. The traditional brave macho way is to deny the problem, push it away, and conjure up our heroic agenda. This is not facing the fear, and it eats at us unconsciously and manifests breakouts periodically. Having a positive outlook is very important to staying healthy. In order to make this work effectively, you have to engage it with full awareness and more love and less macho. Understand and overcome the fear. Unspoken fears create blocks or crimps in the body's energy flow. These blocks ultimately result in problems. The fears keep manifesting in ever greater degrees until we deal with them. It's like the movie Nightmare on Elm Street or Poltergeist. You have to face your fears, and fear isn't always a fear. It's almost something you don't want to look at. When you don't confront these fears, they eventually manifest into physical problems. Face your fears early on. Face the blocks early on. Don't avoid them. Use preventative maintenance and deal with the issues before illness develops. So it begs the question, can illness ultimately be prevented or cured then? Yes. Lifespans are up to the Creator, but we don't have to be sick. We don't have to be the victim to so many accidents. Injuries, illnesses are the physical manifestations of a subconscious block. How to prevent injuries or understand them. Remember the nature of your thoughts just prior to the health problem. What were you thinking? What is the fear this problem is revealing to you? The main character mentions that he felt afraid, ambivalent, and in over his head, but he knew he had to help Charlene. He was confused and didn't know what to do. The doctor then replies, "So you sprained your ankle in order to get out of having to make a decision?" The main character gets defensive. "Are you saying that I sabotaged myself so I wouldn't have to take action? Isn't that too simple?" The doctor says, "That's for you to say, not me. But very often it is simple." Hey, there's no need to be defensive. Just play with the idea. Try to reflect on everything you can about where the health problem came from. Calm your mind and receive this information intuitively or however you connect. How have you been injuring yourself in order to getting out of having to face responsibility? The main character did a self-reflection analysis and realized he faked injuries to avoid having to perform under pressure. He discovered this same drama was a repeated occurrence. Accidents, illness, healing are all more mysterious than any of us ever imagined. This is what I always preach. You have to face your fears and confront everything. People avoid accountability, responsibility like the plague, and it drives me up the wall because it creates so many problems. The new old medical practice. The public has been conditioned to worship doctors as the utmost expert for all things and outsource their healing process to them. Medical opinions should be offered very carefully because people blindly believe whatever the doctor says. The old-time country doctors inherently understood this and would offer optimistic words, and in many cases, if the doctor said the patient would get better, the patient would, and in some cases defy all odds. Later on, with ethics and science, this practice was put to an end and the alternative of the cold facts was presented. And this led in many cases to a rapid decline in health, or the patients would simply drop dead. The body is capable of miraculous regeneration. Body parts are now understood to no longer be solid, but actually be energy systems that can transform overnight. Prayer is being discovered that it works to heal and is undermining the physical model of healing. The steps to healing in this new model. The first step, identify the fear with which the medical problem seems to be connected. This opens up the energy block. Second step, pull in as much energy as possible and focus it at the exact location of the block. Use the pain as a beacon. Focus your attention on the pain and try to feel it as much as possible. Determine its exact location. Place all your attention on that specific area. Be there with all of your being. Third step, consciously send higher divine energy into the exact spot identified by the pain, intending that the love will transform the cells there into a state of perfect functioning. Fourth step, without changing your focus on the point of the pain, begin to feel your energy, the tingle, moving up both legs, through your hips, into your abdomen and chest, and finally into your neck and head. Feel your whole body tingling with the higher vibration. See every organ operating at optimal efficiency. Pain. It's almost as if both the pain and our concentrated attention can't occupy the same space. That's why you got to focus on the pain. In cases of severe pain where you can't concentrate, a light anesthetic can be used to ease the intensity of the beacon, but it's best to leave some pain so that the beacon effect can be utilized. Feel the pain totally. Feel the pain with all of your being, and then image your love energy going right into the heart of the pain, lifting that exact point of your body, the atoms themselves into a higher vibration. See the particles quantum leap into the pure energy optimum state. When you do this, the pain will still be here, but it will be warmer, less bothersome, more like a tingling. Fully acknowledge the beacon. The pain serves another function beyond just telling us that something is wrong. It also points out exactly where the difficulty is so that we can follow it into our bodies like a beacon and place our attention and energy in exactly the right spot. I remember using this when I read this shortly after I had my wisdom teeth removed, and after the anesthetic wore off, severe pain showed up in my mouth, and I said, let me try this. And I focused on it and I tried to understand the pain. And once I did, I was able to live with the pain and I didn't need to take any more painkillers. During the process of me focusing on the pain and trying to understand it, I had these great philosophical revelations about pain and how it's a nerve impulse and how no one else around me is feeling the same pain that I'm feeling, and that really the pain I'm feeling is just these beacons sending nerve impulses to my brain, but nothing is really happening. And I thought of my body, my existential existence, and I had really profound thoughts experiencing the pain. And boy, it was a lot of pain, but once I understood it, the pain kind of like dulled out. But the exercise of experiencing your pain and not avoiding it, it's metaphorical. To deal with your problems, people run away from their truth. Think about all the people taking antidepressants and painkillers, not for pain, but to avoid having to face things. And then even experiencing minor pain, people taking pain medicine instead of evaluating themselves, saying, hey, why am I experiencing this pain right now? What this book is saying is that oftentimes when you're experiencing this pain, it's your subconscious trying to communicate with you and asking you to confront something and think something through. Avoiding confrontation with yourself drives me up the wall, as I said earlier. Confront your fears. Confront all things. Stop avoiding. Confront. Resolve. Find closure. Quick recap of the healing process. Begin by looking at the meaning of the injury or illness. Identify what its occurrence is by pointing out some fear in your life that is holding you back, manifesting in your body. This opens your fear block so the visualization can penetrate. After the block is open, then you can use pain as a beacon, raising the vibration in that area and then in your entire body. Finding the origin of the fear is vitally important. If the origin of the illness or accident is very deep, it often requires hypnosis or intensive counseling. Discovering the origin of the pain will provide you a more fuller understanding of who you are and what your life on earth is all about. The most important step: look deeply enough to remember what you want to do with your life. Real healing takes place when we can envision a new kind of future for ourselves that excites us. Inspiration is what keeps us well. People aren't healed to watch more TV. The immune system. Commitment and excitement with life enhances the immune system. We must take responsibility for our own healing. We can't just turn it over to others. Healing in its essence is about breaking through the fears associated with life, fears that we don't want to face, and finding our own special inspiration, a vision of the future that we know we're here to help create. Medicine must be more responsible, must acknowledge the intuition and vision of the people we treat. This new paradigm in medicine is one based on the patient's ability to take control of his or her life and to get back on the right path. Inwardly, we know how to participate in our own healing, physically and emotionally. We can become inspired to shape a higher, more ideal future, and when we do, miracles happen. With enough energy, there's nothing that can't be healed. So I realized that the lyrics to the song I published in 2004, Gonna Getcha, was influenced by this chapter. So the lyrics go, some people like to say they only want to live in the moment and not think about tomorrow because they want to avoid the inevitable of having to face the things that they've let take place, things they know that have hurt their soul because they didn't want to be responsible. So now, how does it help when you escape your problems? Face your problems, solve your problems, handle your business, stop the drinking, stop the smoking, stop the partying and going out, figure out why you're even in this mess, understand the origin of your stress, take some time to go and confess. Life is a long-term strategy. If you don't live the truth, you can confuse your whole mentality. Because you and your soul know right from wrong. You should be living right, but you're living wrong. You know I write these songs to get you thinking about your whole existence, but most people rather tune me out and go out dancing, so that's why I'm taking this chance now.
Some people like to say they only wanna live in the moment and not think about tomorrow, cause they wanna avoid the inevitable having to face things that they've let take place, things they know that have hurt the soul cause they don't be responsible. So now, how does it help when you escape your problems, face your problems, solve your problems, handle your business, stop the drinking, stop the smoking, stop the partying and going out, figure out why you're even in this mess, understand the origin of your stress, take some time to go and confess. Life is a long-term strategy. If you don't live the truth, you can confuse your whole mentality, cause you and your soul know right from wrong. You should be living right, but you living wrong. You know I write these songs to get you thinking about your whole existence, but most people rather tune me out and go out dancing. So that's why I'm taking this chance now, taking this chance now.
Hold up, we gon' get you what? We gon' get you what?
Totally hypnotized, vision through minds, our extrasensory perception gonna take you beyond the fire. Precognition, telepathy, psychic powers, and ESP1. Your vibe to Mr. Lippy, it's just like psychotherapy, cause I'm exposing the demons and I'm praising the angels, and I break down each topic and I'm explaining all angles. Why you think what you think, why you smoke, why you drink, how you wanna belong, and why you speak what you speak.
That song is a bonus track on the Dream Team Ladies Night album. Thank you for watching Chapter 3. We went way over time in this episode, but I think it was worth it. This concludes Chapter 3. It's an important chapter. It's about the fear and how your injuries and illnesses are manifestations of your subconscious into the physical realm. Alternative healing and holistic medicine was on the rise in the 90s, and it's been suppressed as of late. I guess the pharma mafia hates the competition, and they squashed it. All 3 chapters so far have been incredible. Tons of information and insight. I highly recommend you reading the chapters in the book, acquire a copy for yourself and read it, and then go to these videos and see how they're like a review of the chapter. By me rereading this book 20 years later, it's been providing much more value than it initially did when I first read it, although re-listening to that song I wrote in 2004, I do see the impact of it. There was an impact then, but it's even more of an impact now because I'm wiser and older. So check the Celestine Prophecy playlist on this channel for the complete collection of the series. If you know anyone that could benefit from these videos, pass it on. That's how the word spreads. So like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.